My fiancée sold my car to fund her vacation while I covered all bills, so I ended the engagement, and what happened next shattered her pride. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and when I met my fiancée, I thought I'd finally found the person I could give everything to without hesitation. She had this way of laughing that made me forget how exhausted I was from work, this charm that made the world feel lighter when she was around. I grew up being the responsible one, the guy who always handled the bills, cleaned up the messes, and put everyone else first, and I assumed that love in adulthood meant the same kind of quiet endurance. From the first months together, I covered rent, utilities, groceries, and any little emergencies that popped up, while she focused on her hobbies, dinners out with friends, and weekend trips she insisted were essential for mental health. I never minded, telling myself that love was about patience, about holding the line when things got messy, about being the quiet backbone of a partnership. Every time I handed over a bill or transferred money, I felt a strange pride, like I was proving myself, proving that commitment wasn't just words. The apartment smelled faintly of her vanilla candles, the ones she loved burning constantly even when I thought they were overpowering. "Don't worry, babe, I've got the credit card covered this month," I said one evening, sliding her laptop bag across the counter. She smiled, that effortless smile that made me melt, and whispered, "You always do so much for me. I don't know what I'd do without you." And I believed it, every word, every look. I honestly thought that this was how love worked: sacrifice, support, quiet giving, and never asking for thanks. But I didn't see the tiny red flags, the casual disregard, the little comments that, in hindsight, were warning shots. Little did I know, my generosity was about to be twisted, exploited in ways I couldn't even imagine, and everything I thought I knew about us was about to shatter. At first, it was subtle. She'd hint at wanting things I hadn't budgeted for, little luxuries or spontaneous plans that she framed as harmless. "It's just a small treat, babe," she'd say, leaning on my shoulder with that easy smile, and I'd nod, sliding my card across the counter without thinking. I told myself it was normal, that compromise was part of love, and that I was lucky to be with someone so vibrant and carefree. But the more I gave, the more casual her requests became, until covering her indulgences felt like breathing. It was just part of daily life. Friends would tease me, "Man, you're basically a walking ATM," and I'd laugh, embarrassed, shrugging it off. Deep down, though, I started noticing a gnawing tension every time I checked my accounts, a small knot in my stomach I couldn't shake. One Friday evening, she came home buzzing with excitement. "Guess what, babe? My friends found this amazing getaway. It's only a few hundred for the weekend. You'll love it." Her eyes sparkled, and I felt that old pull, the urge to say yes. "Sure," I said automatically, reaching for my phone to transfer the money I didn't really have to spare. She kissed me on the cheek, pressed herself against me, and whispered, "You always make life so easy for me." That compliment, that look, it should have made me smile. Instead, something felt off, a quiet dissonance I tried to ignore. Later that night, as I lay in bed scrolling through bank statements, I felt the first twinge of unease I couldn't shake. The numbers didn't add up. A chill ran through me, and I couldn't stop thinking, was I really being generous, or was I being taken for granted? And without realizing it yet, I was on the edge of a discovery that would change everything, something that would make me question everything I thought I knew about her. The next few weeks felt like a blur. I kept covering bills, paying for dinners, groceries, and even small emergencies that popped up, her errands, her unexpected purchases. Every time I handed over money, I told myself it was love, that supporting her was what a partner did. But the knot in my stomach tightened. I started noticing how casual she was about money, how easily she brushed off any mention of budget or responsibility. "Relax, babe, I've got this," she'd say, tapping her card with a grin, and I'd nod, forcing a smile while my chest felt heavy with unease. One evening, I was cooking dinner while she lounged on the couch scrolling through social media. "You always do so much," she said, tossing me a casual glance. "I just wish you'd let me handle something for once." I froze for a second, spoon in midair, staring at her. It sounded like gratitude, but the tone didn't match the words. It was more like obligation, like she was reminding me who was really in control. The apartment smelled faintly of her perfume mixed with the burnt edges of the stir-fry I'd forgotten in my distraction. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. But then came the text. A screenshot from one of her friends, innocuous at first, showing a conversation about the epic getaway she was planning, one she hadn't mentioned to me fully. My stomach dropped. My heart raced. I scrolled through the thread again and again, piecing it together, the weekend trip, the money I'd already sent, the excitement in her messages. It wasn't just spontaneous fun. It was planned, and I hadn't known the full story. Something inside me twisted. I felt betrayed, blindsided by someone I'd trusted with everything. And in that quiet kitchen, with the smell of burnt stir-fry and anxiety in the air, I realized that what I thought was love might have been blind obedience all along. I confronted her that night, my voice shaking more than I expected. "Why didn't you tell me about this trip?" I asked, holding the phone like a weapon. She looked up from her phone, blinked, and smirked slightly. "What are you talking about? I mentioned it last week." I shook my head, trying to keep calm. "No, not like this. The plan, the money, everything, you never told me you'd already taken care of it on your own. And the screenshots from your friends, you sold things, didn't you?" Her grin faltered, but only for a moment. "Babe, it's just a few hundred. Why are you making this a big deal?" I could feel my chest tighten, the heat of frustration crawling up my throat. I gritted my teeth. "It's not just the money. It's that you planned this without me, without asking, after everything I've been doing. Do you even see what I do for us?" She rolled her eyes, tossing her hair back. "I know you do a lot. But I can handle small stuff on my own. You're too dramatic sometimes." The words cut deeper than I thought possible. I stared at her, the living room suddenly feeling too small, the air heavy with perfume and tension. Her casual tone, the way she minimized my feelings, it all hit me at once. My generosity, my patience, my love, they'd been taken for granted. I left the kitchen, pacing, trying to breathe. My hands were trembling. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the fridge, and I could feel the weight of everything I had ignored pressing down on me. That night, I realized the cracks weren't small, they were wide, deep, and getting worse. And in that quiet moment, a chilling thought hit me: if this was how she treated me now, what would happen if we were actually married? I sank onto the couch, heart pounding, knowing my next move could change everything, and that I couldn't ignore it any longer. The next morning, I went to work feeling hollow, like I'd lost a part of myself overnight. My head buzzed with every little thing I'd ignored, the subtle manipulations, the small lies, the way she made me feel guilty for expecting basic honesty. I tried to focus on emails and meetings, but every notification on my phone made my chest tighten. Then I got a text from her: "Babe, don't be upset. I didn't think it was a big deal. Can we just move on?" I stared at it, feeling my hands go cold. Move on? After selling my car? After planning a whole trip behind my back while I was the one holding everything together? My mind raced. I couldn't breathe properly. My vision blurred with frustration and hurt. I realized for the first time just how much I had tolerated, how much I had bent, sacrificed, and ignored my own needs for someone who clearly didn't respect me. I called her, trying to stay calm. "We need to talk, seriously. This isn't okay." She sighed, her tone bored and dismissive. "I don't get why you're so dramatic. It's just money and a weekend, chill out." That was the moment something inside me snapped. I felt a surge of rage and despair collide, like I'd been blindfolded for months, and now someone had ripped it off. My stomach churned. The apartment, the quiet, even my own reflection in the window felt suffocating. That night, I sat alone, the hum of the street outside mixing with the pounding of my own heartbeat. I realized how much I had given, and how little she had actually seen me. I felt betrayed, exhausted, and utterly powerless. The love I thought I understood had been one-sided all along, and I couldn't pretend otherwise any longer. I finally understood, I was at my lowest, and there was no going back to how things were. But in that darkness, a quiet clarity formed. I had to make a choice, and it would change everything. The next evening, I asked her to meet me at the apartment. My hands were shaking as I poured 2 glasses of water, trying to calm the storm in my chest. When she walked in, carefree as ever, I realized how impossible it was for her to understand the depth of my frustration. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She plopped down on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "About what?" she asked, smirking. "About everything. About trust, respect, and the fact that you sold my car behind my back," I said, letting the words hang in the air. Her smirk faltered, but only slightly. "It's just a car, babe. I needed the money." "Stop overreacting," she replied, still leaning back, as if she were bored. I felt the familiar heat of anger rise, but this time it was different. It wasn't panic or pleading. I had hit my limit. "I've covered everything, bills, groceries, emergencies, for months, while you treat my efforts like they don't matter. And now, you think selling my car is no big deal?" My voice cracked, but I held her gaze. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who dismisses my feelings, exploits my generosity, and thinks respect is optional." She blinked, finally seeing the seriousness in me, but instead of remorse, she looked annoyed. "You're dramatic. You're making this a bigger deal than it is," she said. I shook my head. "No, this is exactly the deal. Love isn't one-sided. Respect isn't optional. And if you can't see that, we have no future together." I reached for my keys on the counter, the weight of them grounding me. "I'm ending the engagement," I said quietly, but with finality. She froze, the realization hitting her slower than it hit me months ago. The apartment felt suddenly heavy, silent, and empty, like the air itself had shifted. And in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same, neither for us, nor for me. The days after I ended the engagement were surreal. The apartment felt emptier than ever, but also strangely lighter. I kept replaying our last conversation, her dismissive tone, the way she'd minimized everything I did for her. Friends reached out, surprised I'd gone through with it, and some even confessed they'd noticed her manipulation long before I did. But the real shock came a few days later, when I started hearing stories. Mutual friends, ones I trusted, began telling me things I hadn't known, things she'd said about me behind my back. She'd bragged about tricking me into paying for her vacation, about how easy I was to manipulate, about the car being no big deal. Each word felt like a punch to the gut, a confirmation that her charm was just a mask for selfishness I'd ignored. I sat on the balcony one evening, the city lights blurred in my vision, trying to process it. My pride stung, but deeper than that was anger, a simmering realization that she wasn't just careless, she was calculating. And then I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Apparently, she had drained not only my generosity but had attempted to get others to cover things too, small amounts here and there, all while spinning stories that made her look like the victim. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore, it was a pattern, a revelation that my worst fears weren't isolated incidents, they were deliberate. That night, I walked the streets near my apartment, the winter air biting at my face, feeling a strange mixture of humiliation and clarity. I realized I wasn't just angry, I was awakened. She had underestimated me, assumed my patience and loyalty were weaknesses. But I knew now that my next moves could shift the entire story, quietly but irrevocably, and that the power wasn't entirely hers. Something had changed. And I was ready to make her understand, one way or another, exactly what happens when someone crosses the line. I didn't react impulsively. Instead, I let time do the work, observing quietly while she carried on with her usual antics, thinking the engagement ending hadn't affected me. Every boast, every social media post, every smug story she shared about tricking me only reinforced my resolve. I started reclaiming small victories quietly. Friends who had been caught in her manipulations began seeing the truth, and slowly, word got back to her. I didn't need to shout, I didn't need to argue. Her arrogance and entitlement were already setting the stage for their own undoing. I replaced my car with a better one I had saved up for secretly, and drove it past her apartment when I knew she'd see it. Not to provoke, but to show that life went on, and it went on better without her. I reconnected with people she had tried to impress or manipulate, subtly demonstrating that my life wasn't falling apart, and that her perception of power over me was false. Every time she noticed, her confidence wavered, just a little, enough to make me feel the quiet satisfaction of watching truth surface. I also focused on myself, gym sessions, hobbies I'd neglected, friends I'd put second, and even small professional wins that reminded me I didn't need her validation. The apartment, once heavy with tension and betrayal, became mine again, a space of clarity and control. And as I rebuilt my world, the realization settled in, her pride had been shattered, not through confrontation, but through evidence, consistency, and the undeniable truth of my life thriving without her. That quiet, almost invisible victory felt sweeter than any dramatic showdown could have. I knew she couldn't fake charm or manipulate her way out of the consequences this time. The tables had shifted. And for the first time in months, I felt free, in control, and utterly unbroken. Weeks turned into months, and life without her felt almost unreal. The apartment, once tense with anxiety, now smelled like fresh coffee and books I'd stacked on my shelves, small reminders that I controlled my own world. I had more time for friends, for work, for hobbies I'd abandoned trying to keep up with her whims. And slowly, I noticed a shift in how people reacted around her. Mutual friends who had once bought into her story started asking questions, sharing subtle observations. One evening, at a casual get-together, someone mentioned her little tricks and laughed, and I realized she had been spinning a story of me as overbearing and controlling. Hearing the truth circulating, with her lies crumbling quietly in the background, gave me a strange sense of vindication. I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. Life itself was proving what words could not. I even ran into her at a local cafe once. She froze when she saw me, her usual confident smirk faltering. I caught the slight flicker of recognition in her eyes, the realization that the man she had thought was naive, weak, or easily manipulated had not only survived, but thrived. My new car, my calm demeanor, the subtle aura of self-respect I carried, it all hit her like a mirror reflecting the consequences of her arrogance. That day, I walked past her table without a word, and I could feel her staring, a mixture of disbelief and bitter regret. The quiet power of living authentically, of boundaries respected and self-worth preserved, had become its own message. I didn't need revenge in words, life had done it for me. And as I left the cafe, the winter air crisp against my face, I realized that finally, the story wasn't about what she had done to me, it was about what I refused to let her take, my dignity, my peace, and my future. Life without her became a rhythm I didn't know I'd been missing. Mornings felt lighter, the air less heavy, my thoughts no longer crowded with anxiety or second-guessing every interaction. I started taking long walks, revisiting places I loved but had neglected, and even picked up hobbies I'd abandoned trying to accommodate her whims. Each day felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. Friends commented on the change, they said I seemed calmer, more confident, like I had stepped out of a fog. I still thought about her occasionally, the sting of betrayal lingering in quiet moments, but the anger no longer consumed me. Instead, it became fuel, a reminder of what I refused to tolerate ever again. I focused on personal growth, on rebuilding the boundaries I had allowed her to erode, and on nurturing relationships that were reciprocal and genuine. I even started saving for experiences for myself, trips, a new apartment setup, things that reflected my independence and priorities. Sometimes, I'd catch glimpses of her online, posts bragging about vacations, purchases, or social events. And I realized I didn't care, not in the petty, vengeful sense, but in the way someone feels indifferent toward a storm that passed without causing damage. The quiet truth was that I had survived, I had thrived, and she could no longer touch the parts of me that mattered. One evening, I sat by the window, a cup of tea in hand, watching the city lights reflect in the glass. The apartment smelled faintly of vanilla again, but this time it was comforting, not suffocating. I thought about the past months, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the rock-bottom nights, and I smiled quietly to myself. I had not only endured, I had learned, grown, and come out stronger. And finally, for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Over time, the narrative I had lived quietly started to reach others. Mutual friends, the ones who had seen both sides of our relationship, began mentioning what really happened, how I had been taken for granted, how she had manipulated situations, and how my patience had been mistaken for weakness. Hearing it from them was surreal. For months, I had felt trapped in a story only I knew, isolated in my anger and disappointment. Now, pieces of the truth were floating back to me, carried gently through whispers and casual conversations. One afternoon, a friend sent me a screenshot from her group chat. She was complaining about me, twisting the story to paint herself as the victim. I laughed, more softly than I had in years, feeling a mix of pity and triumph. The realization hit me, she couldn't manipulate reality anymore. Her narrative was crumbling under its own weight, and she had no idea how powerless she had become. I met up with some of those same friends later that week. There were smiles, shared laughter, subtle acknowledgments of what had transpired, and a quiet respect I hadn't felt before. I didn't have to explain myself, the truth had a life of its own, unfolding naturally. And it was satisfying, far beyond anything a confrontation could have achieved. Walking home that evening, the city buzzing around me, I thought about how far I'd come. The betrayal had stung, yes, but it had also been a catalyst. I had learned the importance of boundaries, the value of self-respect, and the quiet power of living authentically. And most importantly, I realized that revenge isn't always loud or dramatic, sometimes it's simply thriving while those who underestimated you collapse under their own arrogance. I smiled to myself, letting the winter air wash over my face. For the first time, I truly understood, my life was mine again, and nothing she had done could take that away. It's been months since I ended the engagement, and I finally feel like I'm breathing again. The apartment, the routines, even the small daily annoyances all feel different now, lighter, more mine. I've rebuilt my life around boundaries, respect, and the people who truly care. Every day, I remind myself that love isn't about giving until you break, it's about partnership, trust, and mutual regard. I look back at the months of betrayal and manipulation not with bitterness, but with clarity. They taught me how to value myself in ways I never had before. Occasionally, I hear through mutual friends about her attempts to spin her story, to maintain the image of herself as charming and misunderstood. I don't react. I don't need to. I know the truth, and it lives in my calm mornings, my confident steps, and the respect I've earned from those who truly know me. It's funny how silence can be louder than arguments, and how living well quietly shatters someone's pride far more effectively than any confrontation. I've even started dating again, cautiously, but with a newfound sense of self-worth. I can laugh at little things now, notice the warning signs early, and value honesty above charm. I realize that the heartbreak and betrayal didn't destroy me, they clarified me. They reminded me that my time, energy, and love are precious, and that someone who doesn't see that isn't worth my devotion. Sitting by my window one evening, the city lights reflecting in the glass, I sip my tea and smile. The past feels distant, like a shadow I've stepped out of. I've reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my peace. And the most satisfying truth of all. She thought she had the power, but it was mine all along. I'm free, stronger, and finally, fully myself.